Alright guys, my new sub is getting here in just the next couple hours. I'm replacing a PB12NSD with a PB4000. I'm going to, of course, fully tune the new sub in, but before that, I want to do a baseline and do comparisons before and after. See if you might want to do an upgrade and just see how good we can get each sub in this room. So I'm going to take you through everything you need to know to tune your sub with REW software. We do need some hardware. This is the mini DSP mic. There are other mics around the same price that you can use for this. This is a special calibration mic. It's USB. This is designed by the same company, so I know it's going to be perfect. And these types of mics will come with a calibration file that you either get emailed or can directly download. You need some kind of stand to hold the mic. You don't want to put this on anything that will affect the sound, like a stack of blankets or a big empty box or anything like that. And it needs to be exactly where your head goes. Several inches movement will change your reading, so you do need it to be placed accurately. It does come with this mic stand here, and it also comes with a little nice tripod, and it also comes with a windscreen. So if you do want to use this for other projects like podcasting, putting it on your desk or whatnot, it's an extremely accurate, clear sounding condenser microphone. So this part is going to be up to you. I just have a light stand and a short boom. I'm a photographer and have tons of equipment like this. You are going to have to figure that out for yourself. But it does come with a generous USB length cord that goes to a laptop. You are going to need a laptop, and it needs a USB in and an HDMI out. You could use a home theater PC if it's silent. The point is it can't have any fans. They're going to be kicking on because that noise will be kicked up. Then from the laptop, the HDMI cable goes to your receiver, wherever that may be. Now, you may need to buy a longer cable if you don't have things that can reach. And by the way, this will not be the exact position for testing. This is just going to be for this video to show you guys. And I'm going to throw it up on the TV and show you how to do that too, just for this video's sake. When the test is being run, this will be down on the floor and I'll be out of the picture. But the REW software is free to download. Just go to roomeqwizard.com. You can download the free version of the software. And they do recommend the first version with integrated Java. It's 32-bit, not the 64-bit, and it just works easier. So I installed that. And the last piece of software you need, you go to the mini DSP site, go to the product page for the microphone and scroll down. There's a little field here for putting in the serial number that's on the sticker on the microphone. And then it just gives you the two files to download. I have the two files here. There's a regular and a 90-degree. And that's very important because it correlates to how your microphone is physically oriented. This is in the what's called 90-degree position, pointing straight up. The other, the normal, is where the microphone is facing forward, straight, horizontally. Now here's the difference. If you're measuring one particular speaker, a single point source, or just two-channel stereo, and you've got it in the sweet spot. So it's essentially measuring the center of your stereo speakers, and that's it. Then you put it facing forward, directly forward. If you're doing multi-speakers of any kind, or a subwoofer that's omnidirectional, or a combination, I'll be doing the two mains and the sub, so a 2.1. Then you put it pointing straight up, so it gets a complete room sound as your ears would hear it. Plug your HDMI cable coming from your laptop into whatever's convenient for your receiver. This is called video aux on this and many other Yamahas. So go ahead and turn your system on and set your video input to wherever you plugged in your HDMI lead. And now we have our computer display also up on the TV. Now this isn't necessary. You can do everything from your laptop, but for the sake of this video, and it's easier to see from a distance what you're doing, boom, up on the big screen it goes. Now your laptop may be automatic like this one and just sense the HDMI cable and automatically mirror it, or you may have to play around with your function keys and your display key to get it to do it. So now we fire up the REW software. It detects the microphone because it's plugged in. Yes, we will be using it. Yes, we have a calibration file. And I put it on the desktop. And we're using the 90-degree. Just a quick side note, if you go onto the REW download page and you scroll down a bit, this is where you find the only information on how to use it from the factory. There is a lot of information, and if you click here under the links, you'll find forum posts and such with a lot more information, sometimes contradictory. Now, I've watched every single YouTube video to do with the software. There is no 100% complete version, including this. This is just a little snippet of what it can do and how I'm using it. The two best videos I saw, one was from a German guy. I apologize, I can't remember his name, but I'll put the links down in the description of this video. And the other was from Audioholics. If you put the information in those two together, they did give you a pretty complete picture, but again, neither was complete. So I'll go ahead and make this full screen for you. We're gonna first go into Preferences up here in the right-hand corner. And this is where we need to set up some things to do with our computer and the microphone and that kind of stuff. Now, we're not gonna be touching everything. Most things you simply leave at the default values. And I'm only gonna talk about the things that I need to change, and probably you will too. Output device. We want the output to be going through our HDMI cable. So we need to find that in here. And that's listed right here. It's showing the P75F1, which is my television. And that's connected via the HDMI cable. So don't be looking for something that just says HDMI. It's probably gonna be showing you something about the device that it's plugged into. So that's our output device. Buffer, leave it alone. Input device is our UMIK microphone. That's already selected. And this is the audio input in Windows. We need to make sure that it's just set to microphone. Good to go. So over here, don't be tempted to put in the calibration file that you got for your microphone. This whole tab is about the sound card, and we're not applying a calibration file to the sound card. We're letting it completely pass through and not be a variable. Now, on the back of your subwoofer, you need to set it up according to how your manufacturer says to take baseline readings. On the SVS site, it wants your gain about 3/4 turned. Low pass filter you want to turn off or turn up all the way. That makes sure that your system is controlling the crossover point, not the sub. Phase should be at 0 to start, and that should be good to go as far as the sub settings. So down here we have a check levels button. This is basically just letting us know we have everything connected and set properly. We want, since I'm doing a subwoofer today, to use the default use subwoofer test signal. If you were doing normal speakers, you would just change this to main speaker, but we're doing sub, so that just determines what type of noise it's going to push through. Click the check levels button, and by the way, this help section changes to more information about anything you click on, basically what I'm telling you here. And then we click next, and we should hear some relative pinkish noise coming out of the sub, which I do, and it's at a low level. We're not concerned at all with the numbers this is showing. The only thing that you should see is something coming out the output, and the input and the reference input should be the same, and they are. So it's showing some numbers, we're getting sound, and we're hearing sound. It's pushing through the HDMI, coming in through the microphone. We're good to go. Now, I don't know if the iPhone here is gonna let you hear anything because it's very, very low level and it's very low bass. And I don't think this microphone will pick up either one of those very well. So now we just click finish and we're done with our preferences window and can close that. Now we need to set our actual reference level because the measurements are all done at a specific volume. So up here we click the SPL meter, and this is going to tell us exactly how loud we need to set our receiver's volume level. So this is a very accurate SPL meter down to the 1/10 of a decibel when used with a specific calibrated mic like we're using here. So this is the built-in SPL meter, and when used with this calibrated mic, it is extremely accurate. Now it's very important you set the correct settings down here. This is to be used with two different types of setups. First of all is a calibrated mic plugged in via USB, in which case you want to select the Z weighting. If you were using a handheld SPL meter like the old school Radio Shack units that I used to have and I can't find anymore, that have the dial, the physical thing, that's when you would select the C weighting. I've seen a lot of videos make that mistake. So now that we have that set, everything else is default, that's all we need to do. Now we can hit record, and it's actively listening to the room. It's recording my voice right now. Well, not recording, but it's picking up and metering my voice right now. So if I shut up, it's going down near 50, and the only thing I can hear is the slight hum of the refrigerator and my dog giving me a kiss attack right now. I don't think the iPhone is going to pick up either one of those, but that's the only noise going on in the house. The AC is off, nothing else is running. I can hear birds chirping and a little bit of nature out the big doors here. So we're ready to actually push a tone out. We're going to click up here on generator, and we're going to set this up to give us a pink noise signal of the appropriate levels through the subwoofer. And we're going to be looking for 75 dB to register on here. And we're going to change that via the volume of our sound system as soon as I find my remote. So I'm going to turn things down here to start. That's a very, very low level. We're doing a subwoofer, so it is selecting subwoofer calibration. We want pink noise at the -12 decibels for the RMS level. This is a reference coming through. Output default should work fine. That is what the preferences and settings were set to. If you're doing full range speakers, you want to push the speaker calibration sound. We're doing the sub calibration, so it's just going to do a subsonic signal. Now we can go ahead and click play, and I can hear a very faint sound coming through the sub. Now you need to shut up and make sure the rest of the room is quiet, and now slowly turn up the volume until that reaches 75. It's not going to be that loud. 75 is not a loud signal at all. And there we go. So what's that on? Negative 39.5 is the reference level for my particular system to reach a good average 75 on the SPL meter. We can go ahead and click that green play button again to turn it off. And now we're set up correctly to actually start measuring. Now we're ready to actually take some measurements. In the upper left-hand corner, click measure. This is going to bring up our screen for what we want the system to play. I'm setting a frequency between 10 and 200 Hertz since I'm only doing the subwoofer. If you're doing full range speakers or your whole system or whatever, I would go between 10 and 20,000. -12, 256K, those are all defaults. Output and input should still be set as correct for the defaults, and the microphone. If you want to just verify again that everything is correct, you can click check levels. It plays a quick little tone, and it'll just say a number here, doesn't really matter what it is, level okay. Just verifies that you're in range. So now we just click start measuring. And by the way, if, like me, I'm sitting right next to my microphone right now, which is not how you actually want to take a measurement. If you need time to scoot yourself out of the way before it starts measuring, that's where you add in a second's delay here. So if you need 5 seconds to clear the space, put in 5, and it'll give you a countdown, kind of like a self-timer on a camera. But just for the sake of this video, right now I'm just going to click start measuring, and it's going to do a sweep. Now again, I'm recording this video on an iPhone. It's not going to pick up much, especially since I'm doing a lot of subsonic frequencies here. And this subwoofer that I'm testing right this second only really goes down into the high teens. So I'm not even going to feel anything for part of this sweep. Here we go. So it did a sweep, and you probably heard just the tail end of it. Just a relatively low level signal sweep. This is the default graph it comes back with. Obviously not very useful. Up here we want to click all SPL, so it's only displaying the sound pressure levels. And you can see it's pretty ragged looking. Up here under graph, we can apply what's called smoothing, and it'll just knock down some of the really fine edges of this chart. And we want to use VAR smoothing, and it makes a little bit of a difference. It just gives you actual useful looking data. And if you're doing full range speakers, it's even crazier looking. It's just going to be a ton of squiggly lines until you do this. So here we can see the results of this particular test. This is not the results of this particular sub, because it's not at all set up right now. In fact, it's still using the in-room calibration for its other spot. I just moved it to the front of the room for this video. This is just to confirm that everything is working correctly. Now, when I actually rerun the room correction software for where it's positioned now in the room, I will do another sweep. And then we will see the true response of the sub in that position in this particular room. But here's what you need to know. What you're going to see are dips and peaks, okay? You do not do anything other than move your sub around and possibly change the phase to try to remove dips. These dips, especially this one right here, which is about 55 Hertz, is simply caused by the room. This is caused by suckouts in the room. And the only way you're going to get rid of these is to find a better position for the sub, or a better angle for the sub, or a better listening position in the room. No amount of EQ or boost that you ever try to apply to this region will help this, because this is a natural phenomenon of sound waves canceling each other out. And if you make them stronger, you're just going to make them cancel stronger. This will never go away other than moving things in the room. Now, these peaks, you can do something about. And this is where in your receiver, if you have an EQ for your sub channel, your room correction should automatically bump this down. And I do have a couple spots where I remember the room correction was bumping peaks down, and this may be one of them. This may be an artificial dip. So the point is, don't ever try to correct for a dip, only peaks. And by the way, you're also going to waste all of your amplifier's power if you ever try to boost and correct these dips. But our goal is generally to get a nice flat line. Hard to do, especially with one sub, but do the best you can. So what I'm going to do now is rerun the room correction in my receiver for the sub where it is, and that will certainly help this out. And then I'll rerun it and we'll see what kind of difference it makes. And every time, by the way, you run one of these measurement tests, it saves the results up here in the corner. And this will stack just like layers in Photoshop. We'll have tons of these graphs. You can do as many tests as you want. And here is where you can name things to make them mean much more. So this is just going to be called bass no setup. So now I have the Yamaha mic plugged in the same position as the other calibrated mic. And I'm going to go ahead and measure all of my current speakers and get things to a bass level. That's done. We're going to go ahead and look at the results. Actually, I'll save it first. We can go into the results anytime after. No, do not enable BiPAO volume. That will automatically change the EQ curve as you go up and down in volume. I like it normal. Okay, the Yamaha mic is unplugged and back out of the way. So now we're going to go back into the Yamaha menu. New firmware is available. Ah, great timing. I'm going to do that after this video, so we'll do that later. So we're going to go into setup, manual setup. We're not going to be changing anything here. I just want to see what EQ curve it determined for the subwoofer. So we go down into parametric EQ. Your receiver may not have any of this available. Some do not have the option for any EQ on the sub channel, just levels, phase, and distance. Mine does have a minimal amount. So I like the flat frequency response. So the receiver tries to maintain as flat a response as possible. And you can see these are the curves that it automatically applies to each speaker that it tested. These are the two fronts, and they're slightly different because my seating position is actually not centered. It's just slightly to the right of the speakers if I was in the center. And that's because it's a two-person couch and I sit on the right-hand side. But after running the room correction, the image is absolutely locked center. So it's perfect after calibration. But we're interested in the sub. We're gonna go down to the sub. Hey, what happened to the picture? That was different. That's probably something to do with that firmware. Never did that before. Subwoofer. Okay, so we can see, why is it blanking out like that? Trying to go over to the right. There we go. So we can see that it's applying a dip right at 31.3 hertz. So there was a natural peak in the room, and this is doing its best to try to correct it. And there's a second band just slightly higher. So it's obviously a pretty big peak if it's using both of its EQ bands right there in that position. And then 3 is just a tiny little adjustment up there at 157, which is going to be meaningless because I'm going to have it crossed over lower than that anyway. So the only two we're really concerned about is right here at 39.4 and this at 31.3. So it's using all its might to try to correct this one big boominess right here between 30 and 40 hertz. So now let's go ahead and rerun, exit out of the Yamaha menus, rerun a measurement now that we have the as correct as possible through the system, and see what we get compared to this graph here, which was not room corrected. So that first curve was akin to just getting a new sub and plugging it in after not doing anything. Now there's also a problem with the graphs straight out of the default room correction because they're going to be low. The levels in your system after you run that are always low. Everyone turns up the trim in the receiver and or uses the gain on the back of the subwoofer to turn up their sub volume to where they like it. So the actual levels that we're going to see on these graphs isn't as important as how flat it is. So let's go ahead and take our first real measurement here and see where we're at. So this is with the EQing of the receiver, trying to correct for those two boomy sounds. Everything else we're going to see is the room and the listening position. Again, I'm not so concerned with the absolute volume level, especially between 80 and the lower register, but this is an accurate representation of how this sub is performing. Overall, not too great. Yeah, so those bumps were between 30 and 40 that it was trying to knock down. And what have we got? We've got a average here probably around 60, and we're dipping down to 45 up to almost 75. So there's quite a bit of swing here in the subs range. So now we can just start angling and moving the sub and rerunning things. We're gonna rename this graph our baseline and go from there. So this graph, the green one I just added, is angling the sub about 30 degrees towards the center of the room, and you can see that made things worse. Let's try something else. So we can see the blue line we just added, and what I did was put the sub facing directly flat against the wall, and I moved it down 6 inches to the corner, but the corner falls away, it doesn't go into the room. And we can see that that's overall worse also. We've got another big dip down here in the sub base, which I'm not really concerned about. But we have an even bigger dip up here in the 50s, which I am concerned about. That's going the opposite. So far, the baseline is still the best, and that was about centered on the wall and pulled out just a little bit. So let's turn off our 30 degrees since that was pretty horrible. And we're going to turn off our new blue one. That wasn't so great. And now I'm going to try putting it back in its original position and pulling it out from the wall a few inches and see which direction that takes us. Okay, that's even worse. Now we have very pronounced dips down here in the sub base. A little bit of a gain, just under 20. Everything else is pretty much the same. So, okay, on the right track. I would trade a little bit of a flatter response in the upper teens for lower. I am not really concerned with this at all, especially in this particular sub. And mind you, I'm gonna have to go through all of this again with the new sub. I just want to see if I can tune this one as best I can and see what we're doing. Let's test some more. So just to demonstrate how small of a movement a difference can be made from, this, I guess, purple line is moving the sub 1 inch to the right from the baseline location. So you can see it just starts to move things around. Overall, this area is just a little bit smoother. This dip here isn't nearly as pronounced, and the dips are what we're after. We want to minimize the dips. I have a feeling this one here might be the listening position, or it may have to do with the position of the sub to the fireplace. I'm going to try that next. But down here, like I said, in the lower teens, not worried if this is going up and down. Upper teens and forward is what I'm concerned with. So this changed from a dip to a peak, just moving the sub 1 inch in the room. Again, just a dramatic example. This dark blue is what I just showed you. This light purple is moving it 1 inch back as far as it can go against the baseboard. Same position left and right, just moving 1 inch back. Look at how all of these dips disappeared, and now we have a little bit of a gain just from another 1 inch movement. This is why it's virtually impossible to tune by ear. I mean, you can get it close, you can get it to sound good or not sound good, but moving it 1 inch, you would never know. And most people are gonna way overshoot moving things around in a room because you're not doing it 1 inch at a time. Well, here you can see it, so you know it's making a difference. So I've been testing and testing and testing and testing. And yes, there is a limit to how many you can have over here. So basically I got it as good as I could moving the sub around. The best position I found was 1 inch from the back wall, and my reference position was where this was even with the outlet. So I'm over about 6 inches. That gives me the best overall response. Now notice right here, Chloe, stop it. Hey, no scratching the couch. Get back on your pillow. Get over there. Notice how this green was my best result. And that dip is now a plus, much more even. This is akin to the old baseline. This is listening position dependent. Absolutely nothing I did with the sub, no matter where I put it, was getting rid of this dip. It would change a few decibels up and down, but it was always there until I started moving the microphone backwards. Now overall, to my ear, it sounded better having the couch out here. And actually, the best sound was having the couch out pretty much in the middle of the room. Couldn't do that. The wife would not accept that, so I compromised and I moved it out as far as I could. And music to my ear sounded very good in this position. But obviously, looking at the graph, I had that dip there, and I couldn't hear that. By the way, this also contributes right in this range to that chest pounding bass. Remember when I said that's why I wanted more bass? That's why I'm doing the big upgrade to the PB4000, etc., etc. Well, if I hadn't measured this, I probably, we won't know till it gets here, I probably would have had that anyway, even with the new sub, and I might have been a little disappointed. But now I know to get rid of that and get back more of that visceral feeling, it's listening position critical. So what I'm going to do is pull that table back out of there, move the couch all the way against the back of the room, because right here where the microphone is now, that's giving me that curve. And that's about as far back as possible with the couch all the way against the wall where your head would actually be. So there's no point in measuring further to the wall. Yes, ideally, the best solution would be a listening position out further and a room with walls, but I got to work with what I got. So, moving some furniture, retesting again, just to verify I can keep something like that curve. I don't know yet how much the couch is playing into that graph. So, it may change, it may not, I don't know, when I actually move the couch back, and we'll see what it measures. So, it's better, it's definitely better. The dip is now not nearly as bad. It's half the amplitude that it was before. Here's the setup. Couch is now all the way back. Mic is in the typical head position. So the couch itself was contributing to that slightly better result before, where that dip was up just a couple more decibels. But this is still far better than before. So now what I can concentrate on, because everything we've done to this point was physically manipulating the sub and the listening position only in an attempt to get rid of dips. That's the only thing that gets rid of dips. So now we can use the Yamaha's EQ, the 3-band parametric EQ on the sub channel that it gives us, to try to bring down some of these peaks. So right now I know it's in the 30s, pushing everything down. We can move that up a bit because this big peak here is right about 40. So we can move those around and see if we can smooth that out just a bit. I don't think there's anything else I can do to help that dip, but it's certainly going to be a lot punchier to your ear than it was before. Now I could move the mic around and artificially manipulate it, but this is where I sit. I don't sit on the edge of the couch. It might measure better there. I don't sit with my head pressed against the wall, and it might measure better there. It's irrelevant. This is where your head is when you're sitting. So I'm only concerned about real world results, not manipulating anything to make it look good. I want to actually get it sounding good. So what you do with the Yamaha receivers here, if you're using the default YPAO flat, which is what the system will automatically calibrate to and give you, it'll show you all the results, but you can't change them. In order to change anything, you go to manual, which means you get full control over all channels, all EQs, phase controls, distance, etc., etc. Now, if you go up here or scroll down to the next screen, you've got parametric EQ data copy. So we don't have to start from scratch. If you go into everything now, everything's blank, and that doesn't do you any good, because you do want to start with what it measured. So we're going to copy flat into the manual. So that'll give us a baseline to start with. So now if we go into Subwoofer, we should see what it had applied to the flat, but now we can manipulate it. So this is right around 40 Hertz, and it's only knocking it down 1.5 dB. We want to see if we can come down a lot more than that. Let's come down 6 and just see what happens. And all we have to do is back out and save it, and then run another test. So as you can see, that didn't even make a dent. That big peak there is still pushing just under 40 Hertz. That means it's a room modal. It is simply standing waves in the room. To correct for that, I would need room treatment. I would need bass traps. I would need different placement or more acoustic treatment, but probably bass traps in the corners, especially that one there, in order to flatten that out anymore. I'm gonna play around a little bit more with the EQ, see if I can make any kind of meaningful change, but it looks like with this particular sub in this particular room, these results are about the best possible right now, at least. Okay, so here's final results, and no, not the graph you're seeing right now. I'm going to show you why I was pulling my hair out. So final position for the sub, best I found for this particular sub in this particular room with that particular listening position is right here, just even with the outlet and just a couple inches back from the wall. Phase set to 0. I did try measurements moving the phase. This is a variable dial. Some subs will only have 0 or 180 degrees. This is a full variable. Didn't really find anything better. Things just got weird. So left it there. That's giving me the most even results. But no matter what I was doing, I couldn't get rid of this dip here. It just kept creeping back in until I did some further research. And again, tutorials out there, most of them suck. I was using the wrong industry standard smoothing. What's suggested is not the VAR smoothing, but rather either the psychoacoustic or the 1/6 octave, both of which give almost identical results. And if you apply either one of those, you'll see the 1/6 is a little bit more sensitive, so I'm inclined to go with that one. It looks much, much better. Now, I'm not trying to just make myself feel good. I just want it to be accurate. And the horse's mouth says 1/6 is what you should use. So that's what we're using. And you can see, got a nice, fairly even coverage. We've got, let's see, the bulk of it is going between about 72 and 81. So that's a plus or minus 9, I'm sorry, plus or minus 4.5. Most people will say that plus or minus 5 is the acceptable limit. So I'm just squeaking underneath that. Happy enough. That is perfectly fine for me. Now I am testing this latest round. The first ones were just the subs, but now I'm in small mode, crossed over at 80. So this is with the crossover in. Everything from that 80 line up is the main speakers. So I do have it balanced, and I did play with the gain on the subwoofer to get that line as balanced as possible. I ended up right about 11 o'clock on the gain. I let the room correction then do its thing, and it set automatically to -1. So it's about in the middle of its range. The gain is about in the middle of its range, and that gets you in this room as flat a response as possible. Now from here, you turn up the gain to taste, and there's a lot more to give for this sub. And I certainly do turn it up at least another quarter on the dial to get it sounding really good, especially for movies. But now I know I've got the actual room dialed in, I've got the placement as good as possible, and now it's time for the new sub. Well, now, unfortunate byproduct of moving the listening position, now I have to totally change the speaker positions because they're completely out of whack, and it destroyed my soundstage. It used to be razor sharp focused, and now it's just everywhere. I have got 8 feet now between speakers and 11 to the seating position. Does not work whatsoever. The problem is my AV rack is so wide and fits in the space, so I'm gonna have to just scoot these over and hope that fixes the soundstage. And then, of course, the subwoofer position will have to switch and go more towards this wall. We'll have to see how that works. But Yeah, soundstage is ruined right now. Okay, after much further testing, here's my final verdict. No perfect result. This is gonna be a compromise. So I'm still back up against the wall. Image is definitely better back in the original position, a foot forward. Here, the image is dead nut center. If the singer is mixed right in the center, she sounds human head sized right here, back in the fireplace. Absolutely perfect. Sitting back, just a foot. Gets about as wide as the center speaker. It's no longer, you know, like somebody is literally standing in front of you, but it sounds like a really good song. Okay, so that's the difference. Definitely prefer it here. However, this is still very good. Certainly good enough for movies. That makes absolutely no difference to movies. I'm only talking about 2-channel stereo right now. So, sub actually works out just as well pushed into this corner as it did right in the middle of the wall. So no worries there. The bass is very much better pushed here up against the wall. Moving a foot, now that dip that was present, very, very pronounced, especially in deep vocals and certain drums. It just misses part of the kick in a kick drum. And I mean, it's dramatic. So sticking here with the lower or the more rearward position for sure. Now still waiting on the sub. Delivery drivers are hours behind. I called and checked at 2:30 and they said they still had another stop an hour away, so who knows when it's gonna get here. I think I hear a delivery truck. I hear air brakes. All right, sub is here. There she is, just arrived, 180 pounds shipped, and most of it is sub. It's just some styrofoam inside. Let's get it unboxed. But before we do that, here is the final best result of the old sub in the new position with the mains crossed over at 80 with the seating position in the back. So I'm very happy with those bass results and happy enough with the image. So let's go from there. So they actually have unboxing instructions. It says put the whole thing near where you want it, unfold the box, and basically it becomes a tunnel, push the whole styrofoam assembly out, and then take it off. So that's what I'll do. An easy tip for one person moving, just slide things on a soft blanket. No problemo. Doot doot. First inside we have a t-shirt, and the first thing I'll be doing is installing the isolation feet. If you're wondering if isolation feet or platform is a worthwhile investment, I can absolutely say yes, at least for a subwoofer. I've never tried them on speakers, but they have them for speakers also. What it did dramatically is decrease room vibrations, things vibrating in the room. It stopped all of this from vibrating on this shelf. It stopped dishes over here and spices inside this cabinet. Completely eliminated all of that just by bolting on the feet. Now this may be placebo or it might not be. To my ear, it did sound like transients were slightly crisper, like a kick drum, but I never measured it, so I can't say that for sure. But room vibrations, absolute day and night difference. Well worth it. Well, this should give you an idea of the size. I had to lay down on my back, grab this cardboard, use my feet to push it out in stages. But we're out. Power cord, remote control, documentation, protective styrofoam. I am going to hold on to everything. They do have a 45-day free in-home trial period. So if I want to return it for any reason, usually it's to upgrade to a bigger one, I can. And you get all of your money back, including shipping. Let's go ahead and get this unwrapped. Got the isolation feet on. Now we're gonna flip it back over right into place. It is roughly twice the volume of the old sub. The driver is 1.5 inches larger. It went from 1 to 3 ports and 3 times the amplification. plus all the electronics. So with this new guy, there's nothing on the back like a traditional sub. There's just inputs and outputs, both balanced and unbalanced. And your power connection, and that's it. You got a trigger port. Now, if you're like me and you use your subs in auto mode, note that it's no longer a physical switch, it's in the app itself. So, gotta figure out how to turn it on. Haven't actually read anything yet. Very nice rubberized buttons on the front, although you probably will never touch them because you use the app on your phone or tablet to control everything. There's the power switch. It was hiding. Okay, there she is in the initial position. No idea if it'll stay there. Quite a bitch to move around. The old one, very easy. It was 70 pounds. You put one hand in the port, one hand on the bottom, just pick the thing up, move it, no big deal. This is a beast. So you kind of have to like walk it inch at a time back and forth, but it gets there. Obviously, watch out and do not grab the top here. Ports are on the bottom on this one. And you can see that I haven't moved the speaker, and it's almost even with the speaker, so quite a bit deeper than the old sub. Several inches. The old one came to about here, about even with the wall. So now I'm going to go do the room correction again, just to set the distance and set the basic level. Go through it again, see what our charts look like. So I did the first run at -30 and the Yamaha boosted it all the way to +10, which is maxed out. The receiver is plus or minus 10 dB, so it's over its range, which means you need to crank up the gain on the subwoofer. I've got it at -10, which is the default. So let's go ahead and rerun it. We're looking for something in the -8 to -4 range. Okay, test 2 completed. This is also interesting. With the new seating position, the bass is not only enhanced greatly at the subwoofer, but all the other speakers. It would detect the mains as large to begin with, but the center, it would want crossed over at 90 or 100. And now it's detecting it as large, meaning it doesn't even need a subwoofer. So it's hearing a lot more bass from all the speakers, not just the subwoofer. Anyway, let's see if that -10 did the trick. Go down to level. Come on, I'm used to my harmony where I can just point it anywhere. -3. You know what? That's close enough, certainly good enough for measurements. And by the way, that also makes sure that it's not trying to mess with your other speakers, because it tries to keep everything in balance. If your subwoofer's way out of whack, you're going to see other speakers way out of whack, and you want everything as close to zero as possible. So this is interesting. We have quite different results. This is the results of what the room correction wants to do. And if you remember, the old sub had a correction around 31 and then one at 39. And then a higher one that's beyond the crossover point, which is irrelevant. But this one has one, again, at 39, and then one at 62, and it's a pretty big one in comparison to the one down at 39. So this particular sub in this room at that listening position does have pretty different characteristics. This one has another small one way up at 125. I've got the crossover set at 80. I put the center and mains back to small, so they use the subwoofer. And bada bing, bada boom, nice and even. Okay, now we can do some measurements. The first thing we have to do is calibrate the new sub for test levels. Pink noise, -12, sub calibration, Z weighting. Let's go ahead and play. And then use our volume control. That looks pretty good right there. -34.5 on the receiver. Stop play. Now we can go ahead and take a new measurement. Well, I can tell you that felt a little different. It did feel like there was a little bit more sub bass. So this one on the manufacturer's charts only goes down, I think like another 6 hertz. So it's nothing dramatic, but yow. Yeah, that chart tells you it's pushing out a lot more. Let me turn on the smoothing here real quick and we'll get a better look. Okay, that is very dramatically different in the lower registers. Now mind you, it's the same position. Well, I mean, as close as it can be because they're two different size subs. And same procedure, same room correction, and that's really about it. Same listening position. It's as close as an A/B test as I can give you. Let me pull up the old chart. As soon as I figure out how to do that, I did save it. Open measurement. I called it best old back. It was against the wall. Okay, so there you go. So the new one is definitely pushing out more, and it may be room modal, just maybe the natural amplification, but it definitely level to level is going lower. You can see there is definitely at any point more volume, significantly more volume. So I think that should dramatically show how much more bass and where that more bass is coming with the PB4000. Now mind you, this is at the same measurement reference level of 75 hertz, or I'm sorry, 75 SPL, give or take one. That's pretty dramatic there. So what I would like to do is see if I can use the room modal controls to bring this extreme lower end down. So it's ranging between 40 and really 17. And I want to see what it does in that app. Let's try it out. So here's the app. I'm just going to run through it really quickly with you. This is the home screen, and basically this slider is your gain control. This is primarily what you're going to be using once you set up the basic parameters of the sub. I'm just picking a relatively low level here. What you want to do is set it at a low level, run your room compensation with your receiver, and make sure that it ends up around -8 to -4 dB, and that allows you to get a nice even measurement. And from there, once you get it tuned, you can turn it up to whatever levels you like, but you don't want to go into protection or clipping. So I have no idea where we're going to end up with this. I'm just going to start at -30 and do a first test, see what happens. That's kind of trial and error. You can set presets, and that's for if you want it at a certain level for music, typically lower than movies, you can do so, and it's just a couple clicks there to change your settings. And here is basically your main menu, and it's also reached from the top right corner, and you get this slide-in menu. Low pass filter is typically on the back of subs. This is all app controlled, and typically you leave it off and let your receiver do it. And that's what I do here. On the old sub, you just crank the knob all the way to the right and it disables it. Phase, your typical phase control. Again, the old sub had a physical knob, and this is a slider. Same 0 to 180 control degrees. Polarity, if you need to, for some reason, switch that. Not a very common thing. Here's your parametric EQ. And again, we get a 3-band, just like I have in the receiver. And I'll let the receiver do its thing first, and if I need to lay it on top of that, I will do so here, and this is inside the sub. Alternatively, you could leave it completely flat in the receiver and do everything through here. I have no idea if that would be a cleaner signal or not, but we'll see. Now this next thing is pretty cool, room gain compensation. You remember that big zone around 70 that I couldn't really get down even with the receiver parametric EQ? Well, that's exactly what this is designed to do. You can turn it on, center it around the point that you need it, set your slope, and it will basically just massively cut that section. Now this only goes up to 40, so it won't help me for that 60, but if you do have one of these room modals hitting you, that can be very handy. So next we have port tuning. This sub has 3 ports, and you can plug with these big foam plugs, 1, 3, or none. And what that gives you is completely different characteristics to the sub. You can plug all 3 and basically turn it into a sealed sub for very tight, punchy bass, great for music, but it doesn't go down as low. Standard is all open, kind of the best of both worlds, and then extended drops the range of it and boosts the very low end. Better for movies. I will probably be an extended, but I'll measure it, see if there's much of a difference in this room, and then it's to ear. So I'm going to start with it on standard and just do my base measurements, see what happens. And that's really about it. You've got a basic little tutorial that runs you through everything. Pretty cool. So there it is at the 31 hertz at the default 12 dB per, and pretty much eats up that bottom end, doesn't it? All right, let's try the 40. Well, that's even worse. That's the green one. Okay, not using the room gain compensation. Let's try the parametric EQ. See if we can bring that down a bit. Okay, getting better. What I did is a single band at 20 hertz of negative 12 dB with a Q factor of 4, so it's real narrow. I didn't want it to affect this if possible. I'm going to tighten it up even more and then throw a second one on right here at, it looks like about 36, and do the same thing and see if we can get that hump gone right from there and maybe get some extension back. So here's what I ended up with for the curves. The second one I did at 37, cut as much as possible with a Q factor of 5, a little bit wider, since I had some more room there to play with. And the one slightly lower at 20 hertz, again, cut as much as possible with as narrow a bandwidth as possible to not lose any of that bottom end extension. And here's what it looks like. Pretty damn good, if I do say so myself. So here was just the first EQ curve applied, and you can see that it brought back that little bottom end by tightening up the Q factor, and this is that second EQ that I added. So it brought it down to this. So now this is my new bass curve. Pretty damn good. And that's with the main speakers crossed over. So you can see at 80 right here, absolutely perfect. And it's not over smooth. This is 1/6. Not bad, not bad. Lower end, I mean, super strong down into the high teens, really hitting, I think I can pull up an actual figure. Yeah, look at that. What is this at? Can I click? Sorry, finger. It is at 14.8, so 15. I mean, it's still really strong. This right here is what I'm feeling that I didn't feel with the other sub. And the other sub gave me this from the sub before it, 20 to 30. Wow. But much smoother with, I mean, obviously I went through a lot of tuning before, but that's where it's going to live. Dual subs, yeah, it would help somewhat. I could fill this in a little bit better, but hey, look at that curve. That really doesn't necessitate dual subs, at least not to me. Pretty cool. All right, now for some subjective tests. I'm gonna run some scenes from some movies that I'm very familiar with, and I'll just let you know what I think. Okay, now I've turned the sub up all the way to 0 dB. This is kind of unlike a traditional where the gain goes positive, it just stops at 0. And in the receiver, it was at -3 according to the room correction, so it was at reference level, which is always low. You're always going to turn that up to taste, believe me. I turned that up from -3 to +2. So above the reference level for correction, another 15 dB. It's still not even breathing hard, and it's already slamming way harder than the old setup. I'm just going to play this part of this scene briefly into the intro. Subjectively, here's what is different from the old sub. Now, I'm very familiar with this scene. The bass is blended with the movie so much better now. Those peaks and valleys, you know, I just didn't realize how bad they were because I never measured, but they were there. Now they're not. So part of this is due to having the better sub, and part of it is having to do with it tuned and this different seating position. But the net effect, dramatically more intense low bass, especially below 20. This couch is now vibrating and being hit harder than when I had the old sub here near field in the corner. The whole thing is shaking. There's so much air coming out of those ports, and by the way, no port chuffing in anything I've tested so far. The air coming out of those ports is coming all the way back, and I can feel it on my hand sitting here, especially at the end of this, just rolling into the Aquaman title sequence. It's just this low sub bass, 20 and below, and you can watch the woofer just pushing out gobs of air. Now, I haven't tried it in extended mode. It goes even deeper. So I'm gonna do that as soon as I just get through this. I wanted to see how it's doing. So I'll set it back to the way it was, and then I'll graph for you the other two modes, the sealed and the extended, which I think I'm probably gonna stay with extended just to see how it fares. But here's an example. Again, this is recorded on an iPhone. Absolutely nothing to do with how it really sounds in person, but yeah, it's really even.
Get out! Arthur is talking to the fish.
Such a freak, Arthur.
What are you gonna do about that freak?
It's shaking the whole couch. When the glass is in. It's almost vibrating my hair. This section right here was very boomy before. That whum, whum, whum. It's very even now. I can feel the air from the sub all the way back here. That was absolutely easy for that. I mean, it's no noise, no chuffing. It's definitely even got more, but right here is way more than the old sub and where I like the movies. Wow. Okay, now to test the other two modes. Okay, so here's sealed, which is the red, versus extended, which is the orange. You can see that it gives a little and loses a little in the upper bass, and then just keeps getting stronger down into the sub bass, quite a bit stronger in the subsonic. This is 20 hertz right here at this line. These are the teens. That is a dramatic difference, with a really big difference in the 20s and then tapering off to the 30s, and then pretty much the same, just a couple dB difference. All right, let's do the final back-to-back with standard. So now, what we have to look at are how smooth are they and how deep and how loud are they gonna go at certain points. This is standard with, wow, a surprisingly sharp cutout. This is what I thought, or what I expected to see of the sealed graph. But if we look at sealed, that's pretty damn awesome. Pretty flat and very extended. Obviously from, this is about 18 down, way more potent. I mean, not even close. This is going down to 10 in sealed, which is amazing. Now, if we look at extended, which is supposed to do that, it's kind of in between. It doesn't reach down quite as low. It starts dipping here, right about 13 or so. But the upper teens, 13 to say 18, you've got this really big extended bump, and that's going to give you more feel. So I know I don't want standard. That's completely out of the picture. So it's a question of which of these curves is most appealing. And you know what? I'm gonna say extended because it has overall way more bass from 40 all the way down with that subsonic boost just for feel and impact. And you can't have enough of that. So that's cool. Sealed, man, that really surprised me. I didn't expect it to look so good. So another good option, especially if you're using this for music. Sealed is right up your alley. But I'm gonna go with extended. Get my levels back to where I like them for the movie, and we'll try it out in the final configuration. Well guys, it's 7 o'clock. Been going at it since before 10 o'clock this morning, pretty much nonstop. Well worth it. So, bottom line, differences between the two subs, dramatic in all effects. Is it worth a couple grand difference to you? That's going to be up to you and your room. I definitely say though, no matter what sub you have, go ahead and make the $80, $90 investment in a calibrated mic, get yourself the REW software, and calibrate your room. I mean, it sounded great to my ears before, but dialing it in, you saw how small changes made big differences. Well worth it. Well worth it right there. Even if you don't plan on upgrading a thing, just tune what you have for pretty dramatic results. That's it. Hope this helps somebody. I'm going to enjoy my new system. See ya.